I think this is the best thing going on anywhere, to be in human form incarnated on Earth at this time.
At the soul level, we decide in advance what characteristics, what personality traits, what challenges we want to take on.
The soul chooses who it's going to be born to, what family it will belong to.
And I've thought many times that I might be mandated to Earth. What did I do wrong? Why am I here again?
I felt the power of my soul, the part of me that has always lived and will never die.
I started to see this bright, bright light, this beautiful bright light directly above me. I was just being lifted up by love.
If you could imagine absolute love and absolute peace, that's all you felt in this energy.
That was one of the messages I was sent back with. Go back and tell them life is eternal.
That realm is sharp, clear, detailed, meaningful, powerful, filled with emotional truth and depth. When Nolan flatlined, what I experienced was Mary Fran coming across the veil, and she scooped Nolan up out of his physical body. And they had this exquisite reunion that you can only imagine between a mother and son.
And suddenly I could breathe fine. I was incredibly conscious. I was more alive than I've ever been.
For every 100 souls that qualifies to come down to Earth, and you've got to be an advanced soul to come down here, there's only one body.
I said, I'm home. I'm finally home. I said that over and over.
Time starts to slow down, almost collapse on itself. I began to surrender to the concept of dying.
Everything that was temporal or physical or mortal about that soul was drawn aside, and I saw who he was, and I was in the presence of the divine.
Every single person is this light walking around the center of their body, in the center of their energetic structure, in the center of their chakra system is the heart. It's the heart center. I also understood that was heaven. This is heaven. If you want to be in heaven, you can just be there.
60 interviews, 38 questions, all in a groundbreaking documentary about the afterlife. Every soul knows the joy of remembering who we really are.
Welcome to the Lecture Hour podcast. Today's guest is Peter Alessandria. Thank you for accepting my invite.
Thank you for your invite.
I found you on Beyond with Heather.
So yeah, Heather is awesome. Shout out to Heather Tesh. If you guys don't know Heather, she is a light, man. She is a beautiful light, and we became fast friends. I met her at the IONS conference last year in Phoenix. We ended up hanging out together, and then she co-hosted the Atlanta screening for my film a few weeks ago. I was down in Atlanta where she lives. And so we rented out this theater, and it was great. Had a bunch of people. It was really cool.
I know she is sponsoring IONS conference in August also. She's been really helpful. We've been emailing back and forth. She gave me some tips and tricks for my own podcast. She's just been really, really helpful. And yeah, I love her, man. But about you, you're a filmmaker. I see a lot of myself in you. Your kind of story is almost similar. I don't want to say they're the same, but can you tell us a little bit about who you were before you kind of got into the spiritual realm?
Well, spiritual realm, I mean, I've been a seeker for like 35 years. Most of my adult life, I've wanted to know, what the fuck is going on? Who are we? How did we get here? And where do we go when this is done? So I've just been, literally 35 years. I mean, my nights and weekends were spent, reading A Course in Miracles or going to a workshop, on Buddhism or meditating, a lot of 12-step work actually. And I really found a spiritual connection through working the 12 steps and getting sober. So it's been an ongoing thing for me. In terms of my careers, I'm currently a filmmaker, but I started out my work life as a as an attorney, entertainment attorney in LA. And then in 2009, I literally lost my law practice in the global financial crisis, 2008, 2009. And I decided to pursue my passion for photography and filmmaking. And so I made the transition, and Tyler, it didn't go so well. First 3 years were tough, man. And at first I thought it was because of the economy. You know, the economy was still kind of rough. And then I thought, well, you know, it must be because I don't have a formal education in art or photography or filmmaking. I went to law school. I have an MBA. I have a law degree. I studied economics. I never even took like an art appreciation class in college. And here I am holding myself out to the world as a visual artist. And eventually I realized the problem was not out there. The problem was in here. And I had this really negative self-image when it came to being a creative person. And I was terrified to put myself out there. I was terrified of criticism, rejection. And I'm an adult. I had 20 years in the entertainment business as an attorney. And I still had this thing following me that says, you're not enough. Nobody's going to like you. This is not going to work out. And by the way, it's going to be really painful and humiliating. So what happened was I eventually ran out of money, had a bunch of money saved from my lawyer days. And then I had to get off my butt and do all the things that anybody would have to do to create a successful business for themselves. Things like cold calling, marketing, networking, all that kind of stuff. And eventually I literally went from somebody who never won an award for anything in my life to somebody who's won more than 75 awards for my photography. I went from somebody who was afraid to post photos on Facebook. I mean, literally I was afraid to post on social media to someone whose photos, my work has been published around the world, newspapers, magazines, literally online, obviously, literally millions of people have seen my work. And I ended up, creating a nice little career for myself. And then I could tell you the whole story about how the filmmaking, really came to the front. But that's and how I turned everything around is in this book. So this is my book, Be Bigger Than You Think You Are. Is it backwards? It looks backwards to me. Can you?
It's right.
Yeah,
it's right for me at least.
So that book's it's actually set up as a workbook, and it documents how I went through that transition, how I turned my life around, quite literally. And I talk, I lecture on that book. During the pandemic, I did a 60-week course where we went through the entire book together with a group. And all that is available on my website, the book website, which is bebiggertoday.com. I've never taken a photography class. I've never taken a filmmaking class. I'm completely self-taught. And even I was like in my 30s when I picked up a camera for the first time. I had no, as a kid, I actually had very little creative outlet as a kid. So it all came to me, and I'm just sharing that for people who, maybe like, I'm in my 30s and I don't know what I want to do. I don't know who I am. And, I completely changed my life. I mean, 30 years old is not midlife, but, I'm not a kid anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So it's possible to do a 180 or whatever you want to call it in terms of, how you practice your passion and what you do with your life.
Completely agree. I feel like passions change throughout your life always. I wasn't into this spiritual stuff, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and now I'm super passionate about it. Now it's a passion. Now I got a podcast and talking to you, and
you got a book too, dude. You got a great book.
It's never too late to change your passion or add a passion to your life.
Totally agree.
Can we tell me how we got into Every Soul Knows?
So this is the deal. So I think it was actually the way I wrote this book, was I was in California. I was actually doing a photo shoot for a client in Los Angeles, and then I was going to head up to Yosemite to do some fine art photography. So I do cityscapes, landscapes, and all of that. And even though I'd lived in LA for many years, I'd never been to Yosemite, right? So I finished the photo shoot for the client. I go up there, I'm in the car driving, the whole thing. And it was about a 4.5. Well, I stayed overnight in Big Sur with a friend, and then I continued my trip. I think it was about 3 or 4 hours in the car. And I got out. I was actually looking for a restroom, got out at the visitor center, and somehow I tripped. I caught my leg on a curb that I couldn't see, and I tore my calf muscle. Now, I don't know if you've ever torn a calf muscle, but it's like one of the most painful things you could ever do. And I was immediately rendered lame. I couldn't put any weight on my foot. I couldn't walk. It was a nightmare. somehow I managed to, I didn't go to the hospital because I actually had the same injury on the other leg about 6 years earlier. And I knew exactly what it was. And it was in the middle of nowhere. You know, it would be a half hour to get to a hospital. And the hotel was closer. And so somehow I managed to get to the hotel. I had just stocked up on groceries because I was going to be there for a week. And when I got to the hotel, somehow I drove myself. I got to the hotel and I found the clerk and I told him what happened. I said, I need a pair of crutches. Can you find me a pair of crutches? Within 20 minutes, I had crutches. And what happened was, in the moment that I injured my leg, all right, I had this pain and this confusion. I was like, what happened? But I heard very clearly, and there's a reason I'm telling you this whole story. I heard very clearly, now you can write your book, all right? And that was a moment of clarity. I attribute it maybe to a spirit guide or a guardian angel. It's never come back again. And other, with the exception of one other incident when I was a little younger, I haven't had that. I don't hear voices. I don't see beings. I've never had a near-death experience. I'm not a medium, or anything like that. But I did have that moment of clarity. And the reason I say that is because for years, people were saying, you have to write a book. And I'm saying, yeah, one day I'm going to write a book, right? And I kept putting it off because I'm winning awards. I'm traveling the world. I actually became an official photographer for a fireworks performance company. They do all the big fireworks shows all over the world. They were sending me everywhere. And so I was living my life. And the last thing I was going to do is sit and write a book. Well, now, guess what? I can't walk. And that night at that hotel, I started writing that book. All right. So now we're going to fast forward. It's 2019. I come back to New Jersey. Now I had moved. The other thing, when I changed careers, when I gave up my legal career, I also moved back to the East Coast, where I'm now. I'm in Jersey, about a little less than an hour from New York City, to be closer to my family. My parents are getting older. My sisters, I don't have any kids of my own, but my sisters started having kids, and I was constantly flying back for dance recitals and holidays and birthdays and all of that. So now I'm back here and I'm recuperating. And it turned out to be almost a year to get back on my feet. But during that time, so I was working on my book, but during that time, I read a novel called Adventures in the Afterlife. And Adventures in the Afterlife was written by a guy named William Buhlman. Now, I was familiar with near-death experiences. I was familiar with out-of-body experiences and all that, but I hadn't really dived into it. And I read that novel and something just clicked. And right before that, my dad passed. And I think it was like April of 2019. My dad passed, and that was very difficult. And I, these questions that I said earlier, these questions, where do we come from? What happens when we die? Who are we really? And so I read that novel, and that just got me thinking. And I eventually optioned the novel from the author, and I was going to do a feature film based on that. So I started writing the screenplay. And as part of the research for the screenplays, and then the pandemic hits, right? So we're all home watching YouTube. And I started watching all these NDE videos as part of my research, right? And I got more and more into it. And I went down that rabbit hole where I was just watching all day long. I'm watching all these. And it's really resonating with me. And I'm crying, in the middle of some of these interviews. I'm crying, I'm weeping. And that was this transformation. And eventually, Tyler, what I started to do is reach out to people that were in these, that I saw in these interviews, and started making connections. A lot of them, they responded, and I started having Zoom calls with some of them. And at a certain point in the process, it just hit me. I had to put the screenplay on hold for that feature film, and I have to do a documentary about all this, the near-death experience, right? But I knew I didn't want to do what everybody else was doing. Not that there's anything wrong with this, but to me, it was really important. I had these questions, right? So I started out, if you go to the website for the film is everysoulknows.com. And if you go to that website, there's a page that has these 38 questions. And these were my questions, like, what is the soul? Are there contracts or agreements between souls? Do we have guardian angels or spirit guides? What is karma? Is there such a thing as hell? I had all these questions, right? And so when I started reaching out to these people, I said to them, I said, would you be interested in me interviewing you? And I said, the only hitch was, we're not doing webcams. You have to come to New Jersey, right? And people started saying yes, and I thought at the beginning, I'd be lucky if I got 10 people. And I ended up interviewing, to date, I've interviewed 60 people. Most of them are NDEers. About half of them are NDEers. The rest are psychics, channels, and mediums. And I have to say, meeting these people has completely changed my life. So the first 40 people that I interviewed, I went through these questions that you see on the screen right now. So everybody got the same question. Now, Tyler, did you have a chance to watch the film? Did you see it?
I watched it over 2 days. And then I watched some parts twice.
So you know what happened was those first 40 people that I asked these questions to, number one, none of them knew who else was being interviewed. I was very careful about if you go to the interviews page, you can see all the people I interviewed. I was very careful not to tell anybody who else was being interviewed, and nobody knew what anybody else was saying to answer those questions. And yet when you watch it, it all fits together like it was planned, like it was a puzzle, that all the pieces, they're literally answering each other's questions, or they're answering the same question the same way. Like everybody's got very similar answers. So that was the first part of it. Then about a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, I realized that, and the other thing I didn't want to do, Tyler, was I did not want to sensationalize the death experience, right? The car accident, the surgery, the botched surgery, the cancer, whatever it was that took him out. And so I that was another reason and I had all these people who had all these great NDE stories, and I wasn't letting any of them tell their stories. I was saying, no, we're not going to do your story. We're going to answer these questions, right? But eventually I realized, there is value in telling the stories, and we can do it in a way where we're not exploiting or sensationalizing anybody's story, their death experience and all of that. And so then I started doing all these, first-person accounts of their near-death experiences. And, a lot of people came to me. There were some, like I did go to the IANS conference. The IANS is the International Association for Near-Death Studies, an amazing organization, wonderful friend of the project. The film probably would not be what it is without their help, IANS.org. I'm actually going to be at the conference again this year in Chicago, and I'm doing a 30-minute preview of the film there. So there was a few, and then like Daryl Anka, Daryl channels Bashar, a lot of people know him. The only way he was going to do it is if I went to LA. So I went to LA and I actually interviewed him. I interviewed Sarah Landon and Alyssa Rushton in LA. So I did have a few excursions, trips, but most of the people came to me. And the best part, my deal was this, if you fly into Newark, not JFK or LaGuardia, you got to fly into Newark. I'll pick you up at the airport. I'll bring you to the location, which happens to be my living room. We'll do the interview, right? If we have time, I'll take you out for dinner. If not, I'll take you back to the airport the same day, so you don't have to stay over. And so I made it really easy for them. But the best, some of the best times were in the car on the way to the airport, back and forth, just spending time with these people. And I was so impressed by all of them. I mean, everybody that I met, at least, seems to be so genuine. I'll tell you this, most of them are not getting rich off of telling their stories. And in fact, they're subjecting themselves to all kinds of ridicule, and they're being debunked, and they're being, trolled on social media. It's gotten a lot better, but some of these people have been telling their story for 20 years, 15 years, right? And they took a lot of shit, and they're still doing it. They're still out there. And like I said, some of them are selling books and all that, but, from what I can tell, they're doing it because they want to help. They want to help humanity. They feel like they have a purpose. They have a mission. And they're just beautiful people, and it was life-changing. And I'm so proud of. And here's the other thing too. It's like if you watch the film, you'll see about half the people you probably know, but the other half are people that you probably haven't seen before. And it was really important for me to find some new people to give them a chance to shine, to give them a chance to tell their story, right? And it worked out great, and it's just, this is all I've been doing for 2.5 years now. And I can't imagine doing anything else with my time or my money, because I'm paying for this entire thing myself. And I'm doing all the camera work, all the editing, I even designed, if you watch the film, a lot of the interviewees have mandalas behind them. I designed all the artwork, all the mandalas. I did all of that. So it's really been and I don't have a deal. And in fact, it's been really important for me to not set up a deal for distribution yet. I want to make sure it's finished. having worked in Hollywood for 20 years. I love, there's a lot of very creative people, and the streaming services and all of that is great, but I wanted to make sure that I wasn't beholden to anybody, and that most importantly, I wanted to protect the people that I'm interviewing, because a lot of them went out of their way to come to me. I wasn't paying anybody's travel expenses. They had to come to me at their own expense. And so I didn't want anybody to be, and everybody's in the film, right? 60 people, they're all in there. Now it's more than a film at this point. It's me like a 5-hour. I have enough content to do a 4 to 5 hour thing. I don't know what that's going to be yet. But it was really important that I don't want anybody's story to be exploited or anybody to be ridiculed. I didn't want it to become something that I wasn't proud of and that I felt was not going to be helpful to the audience. This is, I'm calling this Afterlife 101, in the sense that a lot of the people that I envision watching this film probably don't even know what a near-death experience is, right? Or maybe they do, but they've never heard of the life review, or they don't know about soul guides, spirit guides, or they don't know about whatever. I'm trying to make it as accessible as possible. I don't want anybody to be scared. I don't want anybody to feel guilty. I'm also treating everybody the same in terms of I'm not selling the film on the back of anybody's name, or anything like that. So I'm trying to be as equitable to everybody. And the other thing that I did, which was really important, even though it's going to be a 4 to 5 hour project, most people are only going to get a few minutes on camera, right? But they have a lot of really important wisdom to share. So currently, everybody's full interview is available for free on the YouTube channel, which is at Every Soul Knows, as well as on the website. You can watch their full interview. And I actually tell people, I said, go to the website, watch their full interview, because you'll get so much more out of what they have to say. And that was to honor them for honoring me, by coming to me. I want to make sure their voices are heard. And the other thing that it's done is it's created a resource for the audience. So every morning now, I get up and in my inbox, people are binge watching these 60 interviews on the YouTube channel, and it's amazing. People are so grateful that they have this. It's like a resource. It's like a play, and they're watching everybody's interview. I even cut out the mid-roll ads on the YouTube video, so you can watch the whole thing from beginning to end. And that was for me to give back to the people who honored me, like I said, and also to give to the audience.
I didn't know about this YouTube channel. There's a lot of interviews here. You've got you got everybody.
I can't believe half these people said yes, because at the time it was like I had never, I had messed around. I mean, most of my filmmaking was back when I lived in LA, and I did all these short films, and they didn't really go anywhere, but it was like my film school. That's how I learned to light and how to work with actors and all of that. And then the stuff that I did more recently was corporate work. So I had a lot of corporate clients. So I was doing videos for law firms and accounting firms and medical offices and stuff like that. So it wasn't as creative as I might have hoped, but I didn't have a long track record to go to these people and say, I'm this guy, you really have to be in this documentary. And a lot of them just said yes. Some people said yes without even knowing what it was about. It was really amazing. And then some people, like I said, I had to go make sure it was easy for them, had to go see them and all that. But I feel so blessed.
Do you have a favorite interviewer? Do you have a favorite Indie East story?
No, because you know what? I for me, it's like, I think every story, and I've watched hundreds at this point, above and beyond the people I actually interviewed and have met. It's like I was just watching right before we started, I was watching an interview with somebody I hadn't seen before, and she's been around for a while, and I hadn't heard her story. And every time I hear another story, it just expands it's like all of this is about. And I believe this is the reason that we have so many people now coming out with their stories, why so many YouTube channels that are devoted to this topic are blowing up, right? We're in this state, I think, of what people are calling this awakening or this ascension of consciousness, or some people say we're moving from third dimension to fifth dimension. There's some kind of an ascension happening. And every story I hear expands my consciousness, literally, both my mind, but also my heart. I still can get choked up. I can still, even watching some of my interviews, that I've spent hours. I mean, I can tell you every word of every interview. I have 100 hours of interviews, and I can pretty much tell you every single word in every one of those interviews because I'm so familiar with it, right? But I can still get choked up. I can still feel the emotion, that, and so it's not only expanding our minds, it's expanding our heart. And every one of these stories does that for me. And it's not just the people that I interviewed, I feel so blessed that we're alive at this time to have this awakening that's being fueled in part by the NDE, the spiritually transformative experiences, the out-of-body experiences, and all that. But again, for me, it was really important. I didn't want to sensationalize the death experience. So there's no B-roll in my film of car accident scenes or operating rooms and my friends in LA said, you got to have B-roll. Because I got right now, what you saw was about 2 hours and 15 minutes of talking heads. That is the fucking kiss of death in Hollywood, they tell me. And yet it plays. I can't tell you, the people are having spiritual awakenings in the audience. I was on Long Island, right? In February, I think it was. This 85-year-old guy at the end of the film. So one of the things that I do in the in-person screenings is we do a Q&A session with the audience and have people from the film there, and we take questions. And this 85-year-old guy, he gets up and he's lit up, man. He was like, I was so skeptical when I came here, and I thought this was all a fraud. And he says, this film has changed my life. At 85, if I can get to that guy, I think I can get to anybody. But you got to want it, right? People want it. There's still, I'll tell you about my mom real quick. I love my mom. We have a great relationship. We didn't always, we do now. And she said to me recently, she's seen the film a couple of times now. And she said to me, actually, after the first screening, she said, Peter, I'm so proud of you. You're doing such a great job. It looks so professional, going on and on and on. But then she says, but you have to understand, I think this is all a big fairy tale. She's not a believer. She doesn't believe in an afterlife. It's like you get one shot, dude, and then you're done, right? And that's her whatever you want to call, her worldview. Right. And at first I was like, part of, my whole life I've wanted her approval. And I was like, oh, that little feeling of, oh, I've disappointed my mother came up. But then I was like, no, I believe this. This is my truth. And she gets to decide for herself. And I say at the beginning of the film, I say, look, nobody really know until we get there ourselves. None of us is really going to know anyway. Right. But you can, and I stopped the film in several places to do a guided meditation because I want people to decide for themselves. Don't take my word for this. Don't take anybody in the film's word for it. You have to decide for yourself, right? So we actually, again, you saw the film, we stop, we do guided meditation, and people are invited to discover their own truth, their own inner wisdom. And there are some people who are not going to believe, right? And most of my life, Tyler, that's where I was at. I was atheistic. I was actually really angry at God, and then when you're young, you're not really thinking about what happens when you die anyway, right? You're just living your life. I'm getting a little older now, things are changing. Some people, and the other thing that happened in the middle of all this was my younger brother died completely unexpectedly, devastated beyond belief. I cannot tell you the grief and the sadness, and it took all the wind out of my sails. I stopped working on the film for a while. I couldn't do anything. I was so distraught, and my family, we were a mess. And interestingly, I hadn't seen him. We weren't estranged or anything like that, but he had moved to Florida, and I hadn't seen him in a couple of years. And I just called him up. I said, I want to come visit, and he lives close to one of our sisters is down there. So I went to see him. I spent a week with him, and it was good. He was a tough guy, very tough New Yorker. He drove a garbage truck in New York City for a long time, really hardcore New Yorker, right? And he was also not a believer in the afterlife. In fact, when I was visiting him, I was watching somebody's interview on my tablet, and he kind of overheard it, and he just kind of looked at me and dismissed it. It's like, you don't really believe that shit, do you? And I'm like, well, I'm kind of making a movie about all this. I think I probably should, right? And so I spent a week with him, come home, 2 weeks later, he's dead. He dies, right? He had some health issues, but nothing, there was nothing. So what that did for me, Tyler, was it really forced my hand because again, I haven't had a near-death experience. I don't see beings. I don't hear voices. And I really had to, and here I am bringing this message to the world, which is life is eternal. There is no death. We're not our bodies. We're these eternal spiritual beings. We are loved beyond belief, right? We come from love, as love, and for love. We're completely innocent. We're forgiven. for all our quote unquote sins or our mistakes. I mean, this is the message I'm bringing to the world. So I really, really forced my hand. And for a while I was going to stop working on the film. I was like, this, how could there be a loving God when this hurts so bad? Right. It was the grief. And then eventually what happened was I came back to some of the interviews that I had done, and I spent about 3 months helping my sister with his estate, so we're really kind of preoccupied with all that. And I started coming back to the film, and it was working on the film that brought me out of that funk, that grief, that helped me move through that, and it healed me. And now I can almost smile about it because, as you know, the film is dedicated to him, right? And he wasn't a believer in the afterlife, and now he's got a film about the afterlife where he's kind of like one of the main focuses, right? And what's happened is he's come through a bunch of times because half the people I'm interviewing are mediums. So in the middle of an interview, they're like, there's somebody here. His name starts with a J. Does that ring a bell? And my brother's name was John, right? So he's part of this project now, and I can almost laugh about it because, I'm told that he's okay with it. Like he loves it, actually. But at first, I'm wondering, obviously once you get there, for sure. But it's just kind of funny. I can almost chuckle about it. And I do believe, one of the things we talk about in the film are soul plans, soul groups, right? And I do believe this was part of our plan. His soul and my soul had this plan. And of course, he affected a bunch of other people. His death, touched all of us and my family and his friends. But I can see how it fit together. It was the perfect thing I needed at that moment to go all in on this. Because up until then, I was probably 80%, 85%, and now there is no doubt in my mind, absolutely no doubt in my mind that we are eternal spiritual beings. This life is temporary, but it's very, very meaningful, has a lot of potential for us in terms of our soul growth, in terms of just the adventure of being here. And now I have no, and again, I'm not going to try to convince anybody, including my mother. So my mother has now seen it 3 times, right? Most recently with her sisters and a couple of my cousins and my cousin's boyfriend. This was just a couple of weeks ago. And when the film ended, she was the first person to clap. I mean, it was like, and the first couple of times she watched it, she couldn't even keep her eyes open. She was so, it was like she couldn't deal. And now I'm seeing this, I'm getting to her, I guess is what you could say, right? And it's amazing. And ultimately, again, I don't really know, but I do believe, I know in my heart, and that's all we got until we get there ourselves.
I think whether people believe it or not, they all come back with an ultimate message, and no matter what you believe, these messages are something powerful and something that we can live by all together.
Yeah, that's actually, so every one of the people I met, my goal was, and this is why I didn't want to focus so much on how they died, because to me, the near-death experience is just a way into the afterlife or to a higher dimension, if you can call it that. And what I really wanted to know is, what did you learn from your experience, and how can we take what you learned and apply that to our lives while we still think we're here in the physical, to make the world a better place? So messages like, they come back, a lot of them talk about, so there's 3 main parts of the near-death experience. I mean, I'm really generalizing here, but if you look at a broad spectrum of people's stories, there are kind of 3 main, maybe 4 main characteristics, elements that they all share. So the first one is the experience of leaving their body, right? So whether it's a car accident, the accident scene, or whether it's in a hospital room or whatever, they have this sensation of leaving their physical body and actually being able to look back on it, often from a higher elevation, a higher point in the room. And one of the first, and so not only is there a physical detachment, but many of them describe kind of a psychological or even emotional detachment from that body, to the point where a lot of them, sometimes they don't even recognize that as them. They see a body on a gurney and they have to get up really close and realize, holy shit, that was my body. So the first element is this idea that we leave our bodies and consciousness continues, right? We're still, and in a lot of cases, I think you saw in I don't know when you saw the preview, but Tony Sikoria, he's an older guy. He got hit by lightning at a lake. And he's a surgeon and a doctor. and he gets hit by lightning. He's at a payphone. He gets hit by lightning, and he doesn't even know he's dead. It's only when his mother-in-law comes running, screaming towards him and goes right by him as if he's not even there. And he turns around to see where she's going, and he looks down and he sees his dead body on the floor, right? On the ground. He didn't even know he was dead. He says, I thought there'd be bells and whistles, something to let you know that you died. And it's a seamless transition, and the body is left behind. And in many, many cases, there is no regret. There's no attachment. It's just something that we had while we thought we were here, and life goes on very clearly without it. So this first idea is we're not our bodies. All right. Keep that in mind. All right. Number two, a lot of them they go into a void, a tunnel, some kind of a resting place or a place of peace. And many of them describe it as a peace that you can never imagine in the earth plane. And they also talk about the sensation of love, unconditional love, a love that we don't even have human words for, a love that exceeds anything that we've ever experienced in our human form. So there's a sense of peace and love. And then many of them talk about this experience of oneness. They become one with everyone and everything. There's still a sense of an individuated sense of self, but they notice that sense that self is connected to everyone and everything. And it's not just other people. It's, it's all kinds of energy and matter and other planets and other dimensions. There is this amazing sense of unity, of oneness. So my hypothesis is this: if we started living our lives as if we're not our bodies, I'm going to qualify that in a minute. We're not our bodies. We are, we're come from this realm of peace and love, peace that passes understanding, whatever that quote is from the Bible, this sense of unconditional love as who we are. It's not even a sensation of, oh, I feel loved. It's like, I am love. That's what we are. And we were created by an even greater love. And then this idea that we're all connected. That one alone, imagine if we started living as if we were all not the same. Be really careful here how I say this. I'm not saying that we're all the same, but we're all connected. We're part of a greater whole, right? And the whole would be incomplete without every one of us. And some people say, we're all leaves on the same tree. We're fingers on the same hand, whatever metaphor you want to use. What does that mean? Well, that means if I'm connected to you and you're connected to me, what I do for you, I do for myself. And by the way, what I failed to do for you, I failed to do for myself. Imagine if we started living that way. Imagine if we started treating each other as if we were sacred, love-infused divine beings, and we respected and loved even the differences that we have. And this sounds like the hippie stuff from the 1960s, but I think they were right, and so recognizing another person's divinity, recognizing another and especially if you don't agree with them, right? That's the challenge of the physical plane. That's why we're here. We're here for the polarity. We're here for the duality, right? We can't know ourselves as light if there's no darkness, right? And the greater the darkness, the greater the opportunity to know ourselves as light. And that's what our soul wants. Our soul wants to know itself as it is in its own experience. And the only way to do that is to start by forgetting who we really are. We talk in the film, we talk about the veil of forgetting. Before we come into an incarnation, we completely forget our, who and what we really are. And we come here and we're just like, where am I? What the fuck is this? And we grew up in a family with a bunch of other people who've completely forgotten who they are. And then there's the duality of the physical plane, which means, there's pain and pleasure, right? There's hate and love. There's evil and love. There's physical problems. There's all the challenges of the physical world and the physical body. That's the perfect and absolute perfect playground. I was going to say training ground, but it's really the playground for the soul, because in heaven, there is no duality. There is no polarity. It's all love and light. And eventually we stop experiencing ourselves as love and light because there's no contrast. It's all about relationships, right? And so we need the darkness to know ourselves as light. So what I say is, in heaven, it's like reading the book on how to ride the bicycle. In the physical plane, in the earth plane, not only do we actually ride the bike, but then we fall off and scrape our knees. And not only do we fall off and scrape our knees, but all our friends are laughing at us. And in that moment, you get to decide how much you love yourself and how much you're going to love those other kids, right? Because they're laughing at me. Does that mean there's something wrong? Oh, no, I'm not good enough. No, I have to feel ashamed, right? And what is that? That's the absence of self-love. Or we get angry at them, right? And we attack them. It's in those moments, those challenges. And we talk about this in the film. We choose our challenges for the reason that that's the perfect opportunity for us to be who we really are, right? Again, without the darkness, we can't know ourselves as light.
Do you want to talk on reincarnation? Because I feel
Sure.
like that.
What do you want to know?
I feel like that goes right on with it, right? You scrape your knee, you get back on. You don't say, I scraped my knee, so I'm not going back. I don't like this life, so I'm not going back. Your mom, when she had you as a child, went through childbirth and then did it again. But in the moment, she said, "Fuck this! I'm not doing this again." Right? And so I believe reincarnation is brought up in the film, right?
Yeah, we have a section on reincarnation. That's one of the questions, right? Does a soul have more than one incarnation, either on Earth or elsewhere? I'll tell you, the best take on this, which I've heard a lot, came from Daryl Anka. Daryl basically said, it's not really, there are no past lives and there are no future lives because there is no time on the other side. Everything is happening now, right? So all our lives are simultaneous, actually. And the difference is we've focused our attention, our consciousness into, it's like, you know what? It's like a book, right? So all the pages exist in this book right now, but we stop and we open to this particular page, right? That's where our attention is. That's where our focus is. But all the other lives are there. They're just waiting for us to shift our focus. Now, I think the bigger question, which you kind of alluded to, is this idea of whether or not we're here by our own choosing, right? Are we forced to come down here? Are we forced, are we here against our will? And again, another question in the film, are human incarnations voluntarily chosen? Because most of us, when we get here, we say, I would never choose this. Are you fucking kidding me? I would never choose this. Well, that's the veil of forgetting. We forget, but we actually plan out our lives. Now, it's not in minute detail in most cases. There are milestones, major plot points in the average life. If the average life is 80 years, there may be 4 or 5 major events, but we also have free will, and free will is basically how we respond or react to everything that happens in our lives. We can also go off the plan, but eventually, like with me, the plan was, I'm pretty sure, because my guide said, now you can write your book. I was not writing my book. And so they had to knock me back on track. I'm telling you, I hit this curb. I don't know where it came from. I didn't even fall, but somehow I just caught my leg enough to tear my calf muscle and put me out of commission for almost a year with the message, now you can write your book. So they will put us back on track because we plan our lives, like our life plan, our soul's plan. So Rob Schwartz is in the film. Rob's website is yoursoulsplan.com. He talks all about the pre-birth planning process, right? But that's all free. We've chosen all of that. So we've chosen who we're going to marry. We certainly pick our parents, at least one of our parents. We pick our siblings. We choose all of this before we get here. My main point is with this film is we don't know, not only don't we know who we are, right, in terms of who we really are, but we also don't know what's really going on here. All right, guys, your life is not about car payments or what school you get into, or, it's not about any of that, right? We're here for a much more important purpose, which is the growth and evolution of our soul. So we pick certain partners. I got a situation in my life where I've had a 15-year relationship that it has brought me to my knees in so many ways and so many times, and I can't seem to get out of it. I have some kind of a soul contract with this person, or these people actually, they're neighbors, and I can't seem to get away. And it's day after day, it's an opportunity for me to work on my issues, and that's why I'm here, to work through this stuff, I believe. And I believe that's why we're all here. We come in with contracts with other souls, and the people who love us the most on the other side are usually the ones that give us the hardest time here. Not always, but anybody who's really a thorn in your side, an ex-spouse, a kid who's really a problem, parent who's really a problem, You chose those people. And on the other side, you guys, it's probably the deepest love you can imagine. And we ask them to play that role in our lives so we can learn that lesson.
Peter, your passion really shows. And
Thank
I
you.
appreciate you doing this. I'm going to ask you some questions that you've already answered, but just to end the show out. What is your definition of the meaning of life?
Well, the real meaning of life is to live it, right? So no matter what's going on, I think, and I hear this a lot, you've probably heard this too, you know, it's a gift to be here. You know, when I asked this question of are human incarnations voluntarily chosen, many of the people said, you know, there are millions of souls who want to get in here. There are souls lined up. They're just waiting for a body to come into. You know, this is, I mean, Franco Romero, I don't know if you know Franco at all, he's great. He says, this is the hottest ticket in the universe, this earthly experience, right? So appreciate that. I mean, most of my life, I resented my life. I was pissed off about everybody and everything, right? And I felt like a victim. And I still have moments like that, but they're few and far between. And more I can appreciate this gift, as difficult as it is. Because here's the thing, guys, all the earthly challenges that we face, when we get to the other side, we have a whole different perspective on that, right? And whatever injury or damage or loss we may have suffered in our human form is completely gone eventually. Sometimes it lingers, but there's no permanent loss or damage. And there's only this gift of growth, of opportunity to be who we really are. That's what, the purpose of life is to be who we are, right? And who we are these eternal spiritual beings created by love, as love, and for love. And so the more love we can bring to this earthly experience, you know, the more we're fulfilling our purpose, I believe.
If you had one last message for the world, what would it be?
Love yourself. You know, this book, again, I keep pulling this up, but this book for me is, you know, one of the main things that turned my life around was moving from being my own worst enemy to my own best friend. Because all that criticism that I was afraid of and all the rejection that I was terrified of, it really wasn't them that were the problem. It was me. I was so hard on myself, right? I was so critical. I was so judgmental. That's what created the fear, and fear equals resistance, and resistance is you don't get off the couch. So I had to find a way to love myself enough to take all the actions that I needed to take to create a successful career for myself, successful life. So it's self-love, it's self-acceptance, it's self-forgiveness. I did a TEDx talk on forgiveness, and that seems to be another major issue in my life. And self-forgiveness seems to be at the top of the list. If I can't love and forgive myself, it's going to be very difficult for me to genuinely love and forgive another person.
I agree, completely agree. And can you tell us where we can find you and your work and where to see this film?
So the easiest way is just Google my name, Peter Alessandria. The film website, as I said, is everysoulknows.com. The book website is bebiggertoday.com. It's available. It's an audiobook, Kindle, paperback. The film, so I'm still working on the film. I'm actually still editing. So you can see a preview. There's a preview on the website right now. I've been doing I have a screening coming up. If you're in New Jersey, come out on Sunday. I have a screening happening in northern New Jersey. And there may be more screenings, but now I have to finish the edit, and I'm submitting to like the Sundance Film Festival and all of that. And the big thing with the festivals, especially like Sundance, is you can't show whatever. It has to be a premiere, like a world premiere. So I have to, whatever I submit to them, I can't really be showing. So you got a couple of weeks, guys. If you want to watch it, go online. I may leave a preview online, but it's got to be different than what I submit. But mostly I have to finish, and I'm scheduling a few more interviews, actually. I thought I was done with the interviews. Like 60 was not enough. But when I go to the conference in Chicago, and actually if you go to the IONS conference, again, International Association for Near-Death Studies, they have an annual conference. This year it's in Chicago, and I'm showing a 30-minute preview there at the conference, so you can come out and see that. But basically follow the website. I'll be updating people as we go. And eventually, it was really important for me, again, to do it my way, to finish, with my vision for the film. And then it was also really important, which has been great so far, is to see the film with an audience. So like I said, every time that we've done a screening, we've also done an audience Q&A afterwards. And people, the first few previews are like 3 hours. people sat through a 3-hour film and then they stuck around for another hour and a half asking questions, right? So it's like, and that was great. I love being of service in that way because, again, a lot of people, they've never heard of this stuff, some of this stuff at least. So to be there for them, to answer their questions and to get feedback and to watch people, some people have, they're crying, some people are ecstatic, that's why they call it a movie, right? People want to be moved by the experience. So that's been great. But eventually I got to step back and turn it loose on the world. So it might be on a Netflix, it might be on it would have to be everywhere. Like, I'm not going to give it to Netflix. I don't care how much they offer me. I'm not going to give it to them exclusively because I don't want people to have to subscribe to Netflix just to see it. But if they want to take it on and then other, Amazon I'll probably have something on my website too, so people can see it. I want it to be as accessible as possible. So.
Well, I want to thank you for accepting my invite. We could 100% have you back and keep talking. And maybe I'll invite you back after the IANS conference because there's always something new there too.
Yeah, and I got other projects too. I mean, I got other things I want to do. So eventually I have to finish this documentary. But my other website, my film website is Mindful Entertainment, mindfulentertainment.us. You can see some of the other projects I have. I eventually want to turn that into, again, it's mindful entertainment as opposed to mindless entertainment.
And you can click that on the top left corner of Every Soul Knows also, and go straight to it. And I'm gonna have to check that out.
My point is, we'll have more to talk about. So,
hey guys, thanks for joining me on the Light You Are podcast. If you want to support this channel, please like, subscribe, and hit that notification button so you never miss an episode. Also, if you haven't checked out my children's book, The Light You Are, it's available only on Amazon. We're all just trying to remember who we are, the light we are.